This edition of September Song is going to be a bit different. It'll be a little shorter than normal, and there won't be any B-roll. That means pictures other than my face. Sorry. In the last episode, I mentioned that the reason I call this a senior odyssey is that as I get older, I find that my attitudes and understanding seems to change. I've been thinking about doing this episode for a while, and I think I just got up enough nerve to do it. For some people, it's easy to share their innermost feelings. Others, not so much. But I wanted to give this a try. I'm a Southern boy at heart. Mostly I've lived in Tennessee and Texas, although I did spend some time in Indiana. I was born in Chattanooga in 1943. At that time, it was unclear if we would be speaking English, German, or Japanese in the future. But it's not that war I want to talk about. As I became older and started school, I began to learn about history. Now, if you're a Southern boy, you sure learn about the Civil War. I was proud to be a Johnny Reb, and I loved the stars and bars. That's the Confederate battle flag. I learned a lot of history from a book I received in 1952 from my family doctor, M.A. Meacham. The book was A Pictorial History of the Confederacy by Lamont Buchanan. I still have that book, although it's pretty much falling apart. I even made up a story that when Lee surrendered at Appomattox in 1865, General McClellan and an army was on their way to save Lee. Of course, I only knew the name General McClellan from the book. I guess I didn't know at the time McClellan was a Yankee general. I came to embrace the Southern attitude that the war between the states was about states' rights, nothing else. That war was something different to enslaved people. Back to my childhood in the late 40s and 50s. I knew there were black folk in Chattanooga, but there weren't any at H. Clay Evans Elementary School where I went. They were there, they just didn't live where I lived. They lived over on the other side of 9th Street. I certainly encountered blacks. Our building janitor, Ed, was black. The elevator operator in the office building where my grandmother worked was black. My grandmother had a black lady who helped with housework. There were drinking fountains, bathrooms, and waiting rooms just for colored folks. I don't remember hating black folks. I don't remember thinking about them much at all. Did he use the N-word? Probably, but it wasn't out of hate. That's just what they were called in Chattanooga. I was just indifferent. Although I had an uncle that would have shot a black if he thought he could have gotten away with it, he hated. I was indifferent. One seems to be about as bad as the other. I do recall an incident in my childhood that probably plays a part in my later thinking. I was taking a city bus to visit my cousins on the other side of town. I was about 10 years old. A young black boy got on the empty bus and was just a couple of seats from me in the front of the bus. The bus driver stopped the bus and immediately dragged the young boy by his collar to the rear of the bus. My 10-year-old brain had a hard time with that. It occurred to me that there was something wrong about it. It just wasn't right, although I wasn't brought up to think that way. I have noticed my thinking changing a lot over the ensuing 70 years or so. I'm not as proud of the Confederate flag as I once was, especially when I see it paraded through the Capitol Rotunda. I respect the soldiers who died in that terrible war, even the Reb soldiers, most of which never owned slaves. I can't say that I agree with tearing down statues of Confederate leaders and soldiers, although I do understand why they're offensive to some, and for that matter, why they were erected. I have realized that the Civil War was not about states' rights. It was about slavery. We're all products of where and when we grow up. Back in the Stone Age, primitive people did what they did to live and survive. In the Dark Ages, you didn't have to be very bad to get your head whacked off. In 18th century Americans bought slaves to do their field work. It was unfortunately, the way things were. Does that make it right? Certainly not. But times changed and people learned. And maybe that's what it takes, time and learning. Just to say that today my attitude about blacks and Jim Crow policies has changed is not enough. I think I understand, or at least I try to. At least I'm not indifferent.